OK, so, Deirdre just touched on it. It's a story dominating the papers today. Prince William has slammed the BBC after an inquiry found journalist Martin Bashir acted deceitfully to secure that infamous 95 interview with Princess Diana.
Yeah, in a moment, we'll be speaking with our Raw editor, Camilla Tominey, Gyles Brandreth and Denise Headley about all of this. But first, let's take a look at what Prince William had to say.
I mean, it's tough stuff. Camilla, I want to come to you first. This is... I mean, you tell us. It's certainly heartbreaking, but it seems to me to be... This is almost unprecedented for the future King of England to come out and say something like this.
Absolutely. I mean, he's made the punchiest statement there, hasn't he? Both in person, so that people can see the raw emotion on his face, but equally in writing. And let's just take ourselves back to 1995, when Panorama aired this sensational interview with Diana and Martin Bashir, in which famously she referred to Camilla Parker Bowles as the third person in her marriage with Prince Charles. By that point, they had been separated, but this was the interview that led to their divorce. It was so sensational because Diana also touched on her own mental health problems, the fact that she had been self-harming, suffering from bulimia after her pregnancy with Prince William. Equally, she questioned Charles's fitness to be king. I mean, it was explosive. It was watched by nearly half of the British population. It went around the world and it won the BBC countless awards and plaudits for Bashir himself. Having said that, in the immediate aftermath of this interview and into 1996, which Diana later described as the worst year of her life, things started falling apart. First of all, there was a spotlight on the interview itself and suggestions that perhaps this interview had been obtained by unethical methods. The BBC seemed to cover that up at the time. There was an investigation which basically concluded nothing to see here. But as we now know, that interview set in pattern a chain of events that ultimately led to Princess Diana's demise. Her brother Earl Spencer, who was the one who initially was courted by Bashir with a number of claims and smears and this forged paperwork, effectively creating an environment that both the Earl Spencer and Princess Diana thought that people within their inner circle were briefing against them. So effectively creating this climate of fear and paranoia, which then motivated Princess Diana to effectively give this 1-hour confessional. We know that, but we also know that the interview itself led to her making a number of decisions. She had to get divorced at that point because the Queen was so angry with her doing the interview that she ordered Charles and Diana to basically agree their final separation. She was then stripped of her HRH style, and then she took the disastrous decision to dispense with her bodyguards. At that point, as she goes into 1997, she's cutting quite an isolated figure. She's not really in touch with her mother, her brother, her closest friends. And then we all know, if we fast forward to August of 1997, what happened in Paris. So direct correlations are being made, at least by her brother, to this interview. And I think the fallout now, as William has described, is enormous for the BBC. The levels of dishonesty employed by Bashir, but equally, as William has pointed out there, the high-level nature of the cover-up of what happened, so that we're only now finding out how this interview was obtained 25 years later, I think is hugely damning for the national broadcaster.
And Camilla, what does this actually mean now for the BBC? Are they going to have to, you know, I don't know, are they going to have to go to court over this? What's going to actually happen with regards to this?
Well, it's been suggested this morning, Alison, that there could be compensation claims, not just by members of the royal family who've been deeply affected by this, but also key aides of Princess Diana. Let's take a man called Patrick Jeffson, who was her long-serving and very loyal private secretary. Bashir made up claims about him. The BBC also was implicit in suggesting that figures like Jeffson and others who were very close to Diana and had always served her discreetly had been selling stories to the press. This interview led to Jeffson standing down as her right-hand man. He has accepted an apology from the BBC, but I would suggest he and others who have been dragged into this mire and basically accused of dishonouring Diana while they worked for her when they did nothing of the sort, have got a good claim for compensation against the corporation.
Gyles, what's your take on all of this? Someone that has sort of intimate knowledge of how the royal family work.
Well, the government has already indicated through Oliver Dowden, who's the minister responsible for press freedom, that they're going to look again at the governance of the BBC. The question is, would she have given an interview at all? She had already declined the opportunity to be interviewed by David Frost, by Oprah Winfrey, by Barbara Walters, a senior American interviewer. The BBC had suggested that Sue Lawley might interview her. All of this she said no to, but she said yes to Martin Bashir, we now discover, because deceit was used to secure the interview. And the consequences of that were considerable. As Prince William said, in what was a very dignified statement, it fueled her paranoia. It contributed to the state she was in and ultimately to the changes in her life. It forced his parents further apart at a critical time in the childhood of William and Harry. And William and Harry have now produced very separate statements, but together, obviously condemning what's happened. But their tone is slightly different. William, who is an heir apparent, he is going to be the next king but one, actually ends his statement by applauding the press for wanting freedom of the press, talking about Martin Bashir as a rogue operator, not saying it's within the system, wanting the freedom of the press. Whereas Harry brings it up to date and suggests that this sort of behaviour is still going on and is still causing damage.
And I know he's not very well, is he, Martin Bashir? Do you think we'll ever get a statement from him at all?
I think he issued a statement yesterday, basically repeating what he'd said 25 years ago, not really apologising for producing these deceitful bank statements at the heart of it, these faked bank statements, saying that was a stupid error, but not apologising for anything beyond that. But I think we probably heard the last of him, and he obviously hasn't been well. He had a quadruple bypass last year. He had COVID. See photographs of him. He doesn't look well. I think that's, in a sense, the past. It's the BBC goes on. How is it going to make sure this sort of thing never happens again? Sure. And how does it make us look at the royal family, how we treat them? You know, all those. These are big issues.
Denise, what's your take on all of this?
Thank you. I think that the difficulty that we're experiencing in this story is that the BBC has come off very badly in it, and they've had to be accountable for behaviours that took place 25 years ago. But I'm in agreement with Gyles in relation to the tact that either of the princes have taken. And Harry speaks to an ongoing toxic experience that him and his family have had in relation to the press. So I think the difficulty that it is that there's two separate stories, the impact on the family, but also the wider conversation about the press and how they conduct themselves with the royal family, and also with the wider community, because the BBC is a public service broadcaster. So they have some serious lessons to learn, and I don't think they came off in a positive light. But they have been accountable. I think that's an important point to bear in mind.
With that in mind, Director General Tim Davie released a statement yesterday. I think we can take a look at that.
The documents were faked, forged. I can only be driven by what is in the Dyson report. That clearly demonstrates major BBC failings, which, you know, I think it is a dark day for the BBC. We've offered a full apology to those that have been affected.
So, Camilla, just to come back to you, there's a full apology. Will this be the end of it now, or do you think this will rumble on for some time? And like Alison touched on, maybe even result in criminal charges?
I don't think it's the end of it, because I think the BBC is now going to have to take a long, hard look at how this happened and how it was covered up for so long. Just on the issue of accountability, I take Denise's point to a certain extent, but actually, when you look at the equivalent for the tabloid press, which would have been the phone hacking scandal, a newspaper was shut down and hundreds of people lost their jobs. In this case, the people at the heart of this, notably Tony Hall, who is accused of woeful incompetence in covering up this farrago, was promoted to become Director General. So actually there has been no accountability at the BBC until journalists on newspapers, including the Mail and the Mail on Sunday, with the Earl of Spencer's help, have managed to bring this scandal to light. So it's all very well Prince Harry sort of pointing the finger at the tabloid press. William was perhaps more accurate in praising the investigative journalists who managed to expose this scandal. I think moving forward, William isn't on some kind of one-man mission to reform the BBC. I think he sees the BBC as the sort of jewel in the crown of our national broadcasting platform. But at the same time, I think just to turn a blind eye to what has happened, when we are talking about really seriously unethical journalism taking place at the heart of what we expect to be a biased and impartial institution, and that seriously does need to be addressed.
So interesting. And Denise, just out of interest, Harry has talked a lot about his mental health. He's talked about going to therapy for 4 years. Do you think it's the right time for him to talk about this? He's also accused the royal family of neglect. Do you think this is the time to talk about this for Harry?
I think the time to address mental health is always current. I don't think, I understand the concerns that people have about the Duke passing away, and maybe that there is a degree of sensitivity around that. But I think in this country, we hold the royal family up into a myth, and that myth is being debunked. And as a consequence of that, this is creating some of the negative press that Harry and Meghan receive quite a lot of the time when they're talking about their own family. But I don't think that there isn't a time to speak about mental health issues, especially now where we are after the pandemic and where, as a nation, we've all experienced such a difficult trauma. So, yes, I applaud his timing.
Harry sees a direct connection between what happened to Diana and what is happening now to Meghan.
Like history repeating itself?
Absolutely. He sees that Diana was dating a person of colour in Dodi Fayed, and he says this explicitly in his latest announcements. And here he is with a person of colour, with Meghan, and he sees the story repeating itself.
Yeah.
And we are going to get, over the next few days, a trailer of his new podcast for mental health, where he's exploring something I'd not heard of, eye movement desensitizing reprocessing, where we see pictures of him, as it were, going through this therapy and reliving past experiences. And he will be telling us his truth, and because it has helped him, and he hopes it will help others.
Gyles, do you see this as a shift now, almost? We're living in this period where the Queen always famously said, you know, you never complain, you never explain, you never explain, you never complain. And but with these young royals coming now, and I guess the next era of the royal family under William's tenure, do you see almost like, if they don't tell us how to vote, then really they should be able to have these opinions? Because we talk about it in ITV. We have this whole thing, Get Britain Talking.
Yeah.
Now, we can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
We can't say, let's get Britain talking. And then when you know, our first family, the heads of state, talk about things, we say, no, we don't want to hear it from you.
It's a generational change. People like the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, brought up before the Second World War, believed in the stiff upper lip, bottling it, keeping it all in. The new generation believe in letting it all out. And that is just the inevitable way it is. I think Prince William has got the compromise about right, actually. He is open about these issues, but he doesn't really believe in washing his own personal linen in public. So he's trying to maintain a balancing act. And I was very privileged to be at an event where he was taking over from his grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, as the head of a charity, the Playing Fields Association. And it was very interesting to see him, as it were, taking the baton from his grandfather. And when I saw him and Catherine with the crowd, I thought, what you reflect is not so much your parents as your grandparents, because he is outgoing, as the Duke of Edinburgh was. He's also reticent, as the Queen is, and yet he is modern. He gets out there and talks to people and is interested in them.
Yeah.
But we do need that change, though, don't we? We definitely need that change. Can we have a look at the actual image of him talking? I think it's actually a VT of him talking about his addiction to, not addiction, but taking drugs. Oh, we can't watch it at the moment. OK, I'll talk about it later, then.
Yes, this is Harry, the after effect of the death of his mother. I mean, he admits that he went on binge drinking.
Yeah.
You know, drinking in one day what some people would drink in a week.
I like the fact that he's open.
Definitely.
I really do. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Gyles.
all
It's
of you.
fascinating
Denise,
stuff,
thank
isn't it?
you.
Yeah.
Camilla, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gyles.